Hello and welcome to DriveCore. I'm Nathan, and today's car review is, well, long overdue. And that is on my 2007 Audi A4 Avant, which I bought a year ago and have done lots of work to it. And if you've watched my channel for quite some time, you'll see that. And today's car review, though, is going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to take a look further into this generation of Audi A4, the B7, and see whether it's just a refresh of the B6 or if it's actually its own standalone vehicle. Now, for a lot of you Audi freaks out there like myself, you'll just say this is nothing but a refresh version of the B6, and that's it, end of conversation. However, I beg to differ. I do think that this vehicle, looks alone, are what makes it its own platform. However, underneath, a lot of the underpinnings are pretty much the same, which is good and bad, because if you ever need parts or something, you can definitely pick some from the B6 generation. Now, the front end here, of course, is all new and kind of more modern Audi here. You do have this large, big grille at the front here. Yes, you still kind of do have this sort of splitter here in the center, but that nice sort of what made Audi very unique at the time, especially on the R8, was this large grille. I think that's kind of a style that you can't really get on other vehicles, at least at the time. You know, obviously now all new cars have it, and it's kind of boring to look at, having these large open grills, especially with BMWs. They're pretty much the exact same as these now, pretty much, those kidney grills. And then on the rest of this vehicle here, though, you do have these nice adaptive xenon headlights, meaning when you turn the steering wheel at night, the headlights will go with the way the steering is going. And then, of course, this being an S-Line version of the A4, you do have this nice S-Line badge, and then, of course, this nice S-Line bumper, which you have these nice little black inserts right down here at the bottom. But let's go to the side now and let's see what truly separates it from the B6. Starting my way at the front here, working my way to the back of the vehicle, we do have these 17-inch alloy wheels, which are not stock wheels, by the way. There are 18-inch S-Line wheels that do come standard with this S-Line package. And then you move sort of down your way to the back here. You have your side view mirror with the auto dimming function, and these are not to mention power folding, which is quite lovely. Even for a vehicle from 2007, that's quite nice. And of course, down here you do have your turning indicator as well on the side. But one of my favorite features, and before I get too far ahead of this, is actually something you would never guess on a car. And that is the door. It's solid. It weighs a ton, but it's solid. Something that you don't really find on even newer cars nowadays. Now, I know manufacturers are trying to go for lighter materials and trying to, save weight and mostly just save money, to be honest. So therefore, doors and even everything nowadays is just so cheaply made and so light, which is good, but this is something really solid. I just love that thunk sound. I'm gonna do it again. Just so satisfying. Anyways, back to the regular stuff. So yes, you do have a bunch of stuff down here because this is the S-Line package. So you do have these nice door blades, which run from the front door to the rear door here. Now, if this was the S4, they would actually be a bit more thick, meaning that they'd stick out a bit more. But nonetheless, though, I think they're very nice and kind of go nicely with the vehicle. And then, of course, you have your S-Line badge down here, so that way you don't forget and that you can remind people that this is not your regular family hauler. And then you work your way down to the back end here where this nice kind of roofline slopes into the back glass and into the D-pillar. It looks really good. At the back end of this vehicle, it looks just as lovely as the rest of it, at least in my opinion. And that's, of course, because it has this nice S-Line spoiler right here, which comes out just a little bit further than the regular spoiler that comes on this vehicle. And not to mention, these taillights add a little bit of flair to it as well. And of course, this being an S-Line, you do have this nice S-Line bumper with the diffuser. But the best part about this whole back end is the exhaust, and that's because it's powered by this Audi's 3.2 liter naturally aspirated V6, which makes 255 horsepower and 243 foot-pounds of torque. Now, this engine was one of the two options that you did have here in North America. You had this in the 2-liter TFSI, which was a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And of course, in Europe and other countries, you did get more choices from like 1.8 liters all the way to 3-liter diesels. Now, some of you may argue with me on this one, but I do think out of the two engine choices you had here in North America, the 3.2 is actually better. Now, despite the fact that it is a large engine, it takes up most of the small engine bay, and that it is not perfect, meaning that it is a timing chain and not like a time belt like the 2-liter. I do think that overall this one has less problems, at least from what I've heard from owners, including myself. Yes, this one in particular, this is actually a used engine that I had to put in because, well, watch the video and you'll find out that series. But this one here, the timing chains, yes, you would have to kind of be careful with those. If it rattles on startup and doesn't go away after a while, then you might want to look into getting that done before the engine basically grenades on itself, and then doing a carbon clean, but that's about it. And then of course on the 2-liter, there's the common problems of the cam follower off the high pressure fuel pump that often wears out. You have to change that every so often. And then not to mention issues with the turbo, but that's kind of to be expected with any turbocharged engine, so can't fault it too much for that. And then with that one, a timing belt as well, which has to be serviced every now and again. Now, overall, I do think that Audi had really done well with this generation in terms of engine choices. I do feel like the 3.2 is, although really thirsty at times, it does give you enough power when you need it the most. If you're coming from the B6 generation of A4, this interior might seem all too familiar to you. That's because a lot of it is pretty much the same. Now, of course, obviously this being a newer generation, the B7, they did change out quite a bit of things in terms of like the trims. So like I have this nice brushed aluminum trim here. That's because this is the S line. And of course the steering wheel, which is really nice. You do have your controls here for the radio, and also you have telephone, all that stuff, Bluetooth. And I do like the fact that this has the S line badge down here at the bottom. It looks quite nice. And not to mention that most of the other finishes here are pretty much the same. The seats are slightly refreshed, revamped for this generation of A4, and not to mention they are quite nice and supple. One thing I like about Audi in this era is that they really made their interiors still quite elegant, but very simple. And that's really what I kind of take for granted now in newer vehicles, is that everything's kind of blown up proportions with how many sharp edges and things that you have, but everything is very smooth, very nice, and also very high quality. And actually, honestly, I'm going to say it's probably more high quality than their newer vehicles. Now, everything is soft touch, of course. Soft touch here on the doors, down here, armrests, of course. Down here, though, this is sort of the hard plastic, but it doesn't feel super cheap either. It does, you know, of course, jiggle around a bit, but it is almost 20 years old, so no surprise there. But everything else about the interior, even the glove box here, is soft, like the bottom here. That's usually hard plastic, but that is, in fact, soft, which is nice. And not to mention that you do have a decent amount of features for this vehicle. I mean, it's still kind of older, but you do have some tech here, which is more basic. Yeah, you do have an aftermarket head unit here. You would get the option for the Bose sound system, which this vehicle did come equipped with, but you had the navigation, which was another add-on for this vehicle. But this one was just basically the standard Bose system. But then you have your dual zone automatic climate control with your heated front and rear seats, which is quite lovely. And then of course you have these little 2 card holders here on either side that allow you to store your cards or whatever you want to do. And then not to mention you do have your storage down here with your ashtray and cigarette lighter. You do have these 2 cup holders down here at the center. Now, one thing that's always griped me about German cars, especially in this era, and Audi no less, is that you can't really put drinks in these cup holders at both times. At least have one here in the front and one here in the back. However, they did think about that, and you can move your armrest up here like that, which I think is really nice. If you know, you want to put drinks in there, you could definitely do that. You could put taller drinks rather. And not to mention you also have another 12-volt power outlet down here as well. In terms of other nice amenities and features that you got in this vehicle, at least in this trim, is that you do have your auto dimming rearview mirror here, and also the exterior mirrors, which dim as well, as I mentioned earlier. And you have your sunroof controls. You have these little ambient lights that shine down here at night, which is quite nice. And then not to mention you do have your garage home link. And you have this little cool thing that just folds down for the sun, I guess. It kind of blocks out the sun a little bit there. And then in terms of other nice little extras, you do have your automatic rain sensing wipers, automatic headlights, but that's kind of expected now in an Audi. But even then, it was still kind of an option back in the day. Now, some of you may be curious, how well have these plastics and things held up over almost 20 years? And to be honest, most of them have held up pretty well. You know, a lot of these Audis, unfortunately, they have that sort of soft touch, sort of rubberized plastic to them. So that way it looks nice, it feels nice. But unfortunately, over time, especially in the sun, it kind of wears off a little bit, especially here on the doors where the window switches are. You'll definitely notice that. Another common problem with this generation, I think even the B6, is that the glove box does break. And when it does, be prepared to fix that, at least at some point. And of course, this one, the dampener doesn't even work anymore. I'll look at that later. But I think with everything else being said, let's go check out the rear seats and see what that's all about. Sitting here in the rear seats, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's a bit tight for space. Fortunately though, having the driver's seat set to my position for someone who's 5'11", I do have quite a bit of space still to at least breathe for my legs, and not to mention that, you know, having these little cutouts in the back of the seats, thank you Audi, that it does make it seem that much better. And fortunately, I can move my feet up and down a little bit, which feels pretty decent as well. And in terms of headspace, so if I try and get comfortable here, I do have quite a bit of space here between the roof and my head. I'd say probably at least a good few inches. And otherwise, it's not all that bad. Now, in terms of features of what you got back here, you did have a center armrest with a storage cubby down here in the center for like a first aid kit. And then you do have these cup holders, which is quite nice. And then you also have your heated rear seats. And not to mention, you do have these reading lights up above your head here. But other than that, though, you don't really have much else. You do have these map pockets here, and that's pretty much it. There is no storage cubbies here on the door cards, which is kind of unfortunate. I don't know why Audi didn't even think of that, but they didn't. So with all that being said, let's check out the rear cargo area and see what that's all about. In the rear cargo area, there's no surprise here. There's loads of space back here for all your activities, especially if you want to do something more adventurous like biking or maybe go up to the ski hills. There's definitely room for that back here. Now, of course, as being the Avant station wagon version, you can definitely fit a lot more than you expect. And of course, that is thanks to the large opening here at the back. Of course, height-wise, you are a little bit limited, but otherwise you can fit many long items, especially with the rear seats folded down. Now, another cool thing about the back here, if you want some privacy for your items, is that you have this tonneau cover right here. Another nice thing about this tonneau cover is that it doesn't only hide belongings in the rear cargo area, it also provides a little net here to separate your pets from the back area into the seating area in the front. Now, of course, if you were to fold the rear seats down, you can actually keep this tonneau cover attached and actually use this pet netting, as I like to call it, also further up in the vehicle near the front seats, which is kind of cool. In terms of features, don't expect much. You do have a 12-volt power outlet here on the right-hand side, which is a nice touch. And then, of course, under here, you do have your spare wheel, which is actually a full size, which is nice. Audi typically gives you full size spare wheels, at least in this era of Audi. That about wraps up the rear cargo area for this vehicle. Let's get it out on the road and see how well it does. Now that I'm out on this backcountry road today, this is one of the best vehicles for the job. Now, of course, no surprise that a German luxury car like this should handle flawlessly. Although it is almost 20 years old and has had a little bit of suspension refresh, it does pretty well. Now, just like the old days, like I remember with my old Audi A4 this generation, it is a bit nose heavy. It is very noticeable, especially with that mighty V6 at the front here. Now with newer Audis, it's a little bit more evenly weight distributed through the front to the back of the vehicle, but still, this is a bit heavy. And not to mention that, you know, going through these corners, you do get that understeer sometimes. Another good thing I like about this vehicle in terms of handling, of course, is its steering. Now, the steering, just like a lot of older German luxury cars, are hydraulically powered, meaning that, of course, there is more that can go wrong, at least in some cases. But regardless, it feels more natural. You can really feel the road and what the wheels are doing, especially in this corner I'm going in now. It feels fantastic. I knew where the wheels were, and also not to mention it was nice and heavy. And I'm a big stickler for steering in vehicles because I find a lot of newer vehicles nowadays with their electronic power steering, it just feels so numb and feels so light in some vehicles. I mean, not all, some of them are pretty dialed in, but this one, I love that it's just like, I know what it's doing at all times, and I get a lot of feedback through it, and gosh, can't we just bring that back? So this version of the A4 that I'm driving here today is paired with the automatic 6-speed DSG transmission. Yeah, you could option for a 6-speed manual, but honestly, I will have to give credit where credit is due, and I have to say that they did a pretty good job with this transmission. Now, this ZF transmission that's in this vehicle is pretty decent. It is a little bit jerky at low speeds, and it's not just due to the age of the vehicle. They're always just kind of like that. So in stop and go traffic, it does feel a little bit more, I'd say, clunky at times, but it's just the way they are. But then once you get into more cruising speeds, like Autobahn speeds, it's perfectly fine. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the review, one of my favorite things about this car is the exhaust. Now, this being a stock exhaust on this vehicle, paired with this 3.2 liter V6, it is almost addicting at times to put your foot down on the pedal. And actually, you know what? You don't really have to do that because it's just that little rumble that you get at almost any given speed, like I'll do now. And then even on the highway too, you have that little slight rumble at all times, and it's just a nice little sound that, oh man, it is just beautiful. Audi, good on you for pairing this vehicle with a dual exhaust with this engine. It is just perfect. Having an exhaust system like this and wanting to put your foot down a little bit on the accelerator at times can cost you quite a bit in fuel economy. Now, this vehicle is definitely not perfect in any means in that category. You do get 11.8 liters per 100 kilometers combined for city and highway, and if you're using the Imperial system still, that is about 20 miles per gallon combined in city and highway. And of course, you have to use premium fuel, which in here in North America is 91 octane, and it can add up really over time. But honestly, what do they say? More miles per gallon? I agree with that. So I've given it some thought about this generation of A4, and it's not what I expected to say, to be honest. I thought I was going to agree with everyone usually that would say that this is nothing but a refresh and that's it. However, I look at it a bit differently. I think without this generation, that we wouldn't know Audi as we do today. Meaning, at least more personally for me, without this generation, I don't think I would have even looked at Audis in my past life. And even today, having owned this one now. And I know a lot of us only remember this generation for the RS4. And granted, yes, that's a fantastic vehicle, even Jeremy Clarkson likes it, but without the regular A4, we wouldn't have that RS4 either. So think about that for a moment. So if you're looking for a vehicle like this, and you're not afraid of working on a German car or having a little bit of money squirreled away to do some maintenance, then I would definitely consider this vehicle. No vehicle is perfect, whether it be a Honda or even an Audi, but a vehicle like this will definitely bring you lots of joy like it has me. So what are you waiting for? Go out there today and look for one of these vehicles, because you can find one for between 5,000 and 8,000 Canadian. Once you finish this video, browse Facebook Marketplace or Auto Trader, whatever, and look for one, because you're gonna want one, and when you find it, you'll know. And on that note, I just wanna say thank you very much for watching today's car review. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, and also consider subscribing so that way you don't miss any future car reviews like this, and projects and DIYs on my channel. And until next time, take care, bye now.